You're listening to the Youth for Life podcast with Michelle Baum, Director of Y for Life at Lutherans for Life, where we prepare youth to be gospel-motivated voices for life. Be sure to stick around after today's live recording of our Chats for Life program to find out how you can be live too on our next Youth for Life podcast.
Welcome our guest speaker, Katy Faust, who is the founder and president, CEO of Them Before Us. And so she's going to be speaking to us tonight about children, families, and how families can support children. So I'm going to let her start off with a prayer tonight and then get started. So thanks again for joining us, Katy. Welcome to Chats.
Good. Thank you. God, thank you for this time with all of these people who are seeking to know you, seeking to understand your world, seeking to do your will. Thank you, God, that you treasure the most vulnerable and that we, the church, are your plan A for ministering to them and defending them. So I pray that you would offer clarity and courage so that we can better know how to protect those that you call precious in your sight. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so I want to know, are you guys in high school or college? Raise your hand if you're in high school. Get an idea of where we're at here, okay? A high schooler. Good work. Who is that with the hand up? Not Lorelei?
This is TJ. Or do you
TJ.
TJ's fine.
Okay.
Way to represent, ma'am. Okay, good work. And then others in college? Anyone else college age? Okay, fantastic, good. So mainly college level. TJ, you're gonna have to level up here. I think you can handle it. Great. You guys are all part of Students for Life, yes? Yes. So you're very familiar with children.
Yeah, they're part of Y for Life. So the Lutherans for Life organization, and maybe or related to someone, maybe they brought friends with them. So, but yeah.
Perfect. Okay, I love it. Very good. So you probably have some level of understanding that children have a right to life, right? Raise your hand. You understand children have, is that it? Raise your hand if that's a new concept for you, that children have a right to life. Anyone? New concept? Ever heard that before? Fantastic. Okay, so we are beyond Children's Rights 101. What I'm doing, I very often call Children's Rights 2.0. So if fighting for children's right to life by fighting against abortion is the first fight for the rights of children, which it is, marriage and family is Children's Rights 2.0. Because children have more than just a right to life. Children also have a right on this side of the womb as well. And that primary right is not only a right to life, but it's a right to be known and loved by the two people responsible for their existence, their mother and father. Now, just like a child's right to life, sometimes is not recognized by civil law, right? We have spent quite a bit of time battling bad Supreme Court decisions or bad state legislation that violates children's right to life, that ignores the fact that they have a right to life. Sometimes civil law does not match natural law. And yet all of you continue to fight for children's right to life because they have a right to life regardless of what the government says, right? They have a right to life based on the natural world, the natural system that we can discover of morality called natural law, right? This is the same basis on which Martin Luther King Jr. advocated for equality for African Americans. He said, I understand that civil law does not recognize that we have equal rights in this country, but natural law does. And you'll remember his famous quote that said, an unjust law is no law at all. Well, how do you know what an unjust law is? It's a law that goes against the natural law that is discoverable and discernible through reason by looking at human design, okay? So we know that children have a natural right to life, and we know that Blacks and whites are equal based on this natural law. This natural law also tells us that children have a right to be known, loved, and raised by both their mother and father whenever possible. So pro-life work secures a child's right to life. As far as we know about everything about child development, about family structure, fighting for children's right to their mother and father secures a child's thriving. And so both of these go hand in hand. Both of them stem from the natural rights of the child. Both of them are self-evident rights, things that you can discover just by looking at the self-evident nature of the world. So thank God, there are hundreds and hundreds of fantastic organizations advocating for children's right to life. Thank God. May there be thousands more. Right now, Them Before Us is the only organization that is defending children's right to their mother and father. Let me just do a little illustration about the power of this natural right. I'm going to just assume that you all understand the power of defending a child's right to life. Let's talk about the power of defending children's right to their mother and father. So I'll just throw out a few major issues of social justice, right, that a lot of us are really concerned about. So homelessness, teen poverty, teen incarceration, kids committing crimes and being put in teen detention centers or prisons, teen pregnancy, teen suicide. If you had to choose one of those, if you could just end one of them completely right now, which one would you choose? Let's see what I listed. Homelessness, poverty, suicide, teen pregnancy, teen incarceration. There's 5. So just tell me, which of those really, really burdens you? And if you could just say, we're done with that. We are not going to deal with that as society. I'm going to mend that completely. What would you choose? I want to hear from you guys. Which is the one that really burdens you that you're like, that's the one I would fix?
Suicide.
Yeah. Epidemic rates right now. Yeah. Suicide. What else? Homelessness. Olivia says homelessness. Yep. That's a big one. What else?
I'm going to go with suicide too.
Yeah. And we've an increase, right? Especially post pandemic, and a lot of the isolation has fueled some of the increased risk of suicide. Absolutely. What else?
I think poverty.
Child poverty. Really, really difficult and desperate, and kind of sets you on a challenging track for the rest of your life, for sure. What about teen pregnancy? Who would just say no more teen pregnancy out of wedlock, right? Who would say that's the one I would fix? It's on my list for sure. What about kids in jail? What if you could just say no more kids in jail, no more kids committing crime? That might be mine. It makes me sick. Personally, for me, I look at that and I'm like, I can't choose. I don't want kids living on the street. I don't want them committing suicide. I don't want them getting to be pregnant when they're teens. I don't want them living in poverty. I don't want them going to jail. I can't choose. What if I told you there was an all of the above option, and you could do one thing and wipe out all 5 things that I just mentioned? And then what if I told you it was cheap and affordable? Would you do that thing? Raise your hand if you would be like, yes, give me the all of the above option. Yeah, same. There is something that all of those demographics have in common. And it is disproportionately, all of those kids are being raised without their dad. 90% of kids who live on the street don't have a father. You are 4 times more likely to live in poverty without your dad in your home. 71% of kids who attempt suicide and commit suicide don't have dads in the home. 71% of teen pregnancies, fatherless. 70 to 85% of teens in incarceration centers did not come from a home with a mom and dad. There is something drastic that happens when children's right to be known and loved by their mother and father is denied. And it is disproportionate struggle, massive increase in risk that they are going to fall prey to all of these social ills that burden all of us, and that the government spends so much money to try and fix, and yet never seems to be able to make any progress on. And that's because the government can't love a child, right? And those 2 people responsible for a child's existence somehow sets children up for success. Does that mean that kids raised by their married mom and dad live a trouble-free life? No. You know it's not. You know that kids raised by their married mom and dad also can struggle. Does it mean that kids raised by a single mom are doomed? No, not at all. Like, we've got so many fantastic examples of kids who were fatherless who have overcome. Those people would also say, I had a whole lot of extra challenges because it was just me and my mom. So why is it that having a married mom and dad, being raised by your mother and father, defending the right of children that they have to their own mom and dad, why is that right so powerful? Why is it that if we defended that right, we would decimate teen homelessness, teen poverty, teen suicide, teen pregnancy, teen incarceration? And honestly, you can add things like obesity to that list. You can add things like school dropouts to that list. Pretty much every social ill that we are trying to fix is aggravated by kids who aren't being raised by their mom and dad. So why is this fundamental natural right so powerful? I'll give you 3 reasons. If we can defend this fundamental child right to be known and loved by both of their parents, there's 3 advantages. Number 1, statistically, a child's own mother and father are the most connected to, invested in, and protective of them. You can look at this from an evolutionary perspective. In fact, that's where most of the study has been done, is evolutionary biologists who are asking the question, is there an advantage, and if so, how much, to children being raised by their biological parents? And the answer is, there is a drastic advantage. And from an evolutionary biology perspective, they're thinking about like, okay, we descended from apes, and so this is kind of leftover behavior from our, primate past. And that is that like adults tend to invest in their own genetic offspring because they are trying to continue their genetic posterity, right? And so that's their theory about why there's such a discrepancy. And there is. We catalog in our book that unrelated caregivers, whether it's stepmothers, stepfathers, live-in boyfriend, live-in girlfriend, they spend less money on food for kids that are not related to them. They buckle kids' seatbelts less often. They take kids to the doctor less often. They're just generally less attentive to the kids in their care. Even if they're not directly trying to harm the child, children who are raised by someone who's unrelated to them, they suffer more accidental injuries and death just because there's not that same level of attentiveness. But beyond that, unrelated adults, especially a cohabiting man, statistically is the most dangerous person in the child's life. So I want you to grab your phones and I want you to Google the words mother's boyfriend, okay? Because what the world is telling us about marriage and family today are messages like biology doesn't matter. Kids just need to be safe and loved. Have you guys heard that before? Right? Kids don't need moms and dads. They just need to be safe and loved. Very, very common. Like I'm in the marriage and family world. I hear that all the time. Okay. And so, yeah, I agree. I want kids to be safe and loved. And so the narrative is biology doesn't matter. Kids just need to be safe and loved. And if the adults are happy, the kids will be happy, right? So if that's true, then mom with her live-in boyfriend, those kids should be doing great because they've got a mom, they've got a father figure, there's 2 incomes, the adults are happy, so the kids must also be happy. So when you Google the words mother's boyfriend, what did you see? Anybody want to unmute and read off some of the top hits for me?
I see, why are mother's boyfriends so likely to kill?
Good. Any others?
Child abuse by mother's boyfriend, why the overrepresentation?
Good. Anything else?
Mother's boyfriend kills child, kills 3-year-old.
Teens killing mother's boyfriend.
You will find endless pages of the most horrific cases of child abuse and filicide, that is child homicide, when you search for mother's boyfriend. Why? Because biology confers a level of safety and protection that an unrelated adult who is seeking a relationship with the child's parent simply will not confer on them. This is a statistical reality. It is not necessarily an individual reality. And what I mean by that is, I know heroic step-parents who are filling the gap of a negligent biological parent, who are deciding and choosing to do the hard thing so that kids can have that mother figure or father figure that they deserve, because maybe their own mom or dad didn't want to act like an adult. But overall, biology offers children the safest adults in their life. Statistically, you do still have biological parents that abuse their children, but it's at minuscule rates. And every other form of family structure only increases the likelihood of abuse and neglect. So if we can defend children's right to their mother and father, children statistically get the two adults who are the safest, most connected to, and most invested in their life. The second reason why defending this fundamental child right has such a massive influence on a child's thriving and future is because only those two adults grant children something that they crave, and that is their biological identity. So everybody that is your age and younger is asking the question, who am I? This is probably the most universal existential question that there is, right? We all say, who am I? And the world will tell you different ways to label yourself. The world is happy to supply you with an identity. But the way that people have historically answered that question has a lot to do with whose am I? It's very hard to know who am I if you don't know from who you came. And that's actually something that we learned from adoptees, right? Adoption has been around for a long time, but it really escalated in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, when there was a popular idea that children were better off with adoptive parents than they were a single mom who probably would have been a great mom. And so there at the time was quite a bit of pressure and coercion for those women to release and relinquish their children. And at that time in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, a lot of times adoptees were not told that they were even adopted. And yet many of them felt like there was something wrong, like there's something missing here. I feel out of place. It's a term that they call genealogical bewilderment. They would look in the mirror and just say, something doesn't feel right here. And what they discovered is that adoptees fare best when they have as much contact with their first family as possible. And that actually radically changed the way that we do adoption. Today, back then, like there were no open adoptions. Kids didn't know. They didn't even know they were adopted. If they did, they didn't know their birth families. Then if they could find it, they'd have to wait till they were 18 and unseal a birth record. Today, 95% of adoptions are open adoptions because social workers recognize that kids do better when they have as much access and knowledge about their first family as possible, even if they can't be raised by them. We also now have an entire industry that separates children from a biological parent at conception. We now have a marketplace of sperm donation and egg donation and surrogacy that intentionally cuts children off from one or both biological parent. And some of these kids are now old enough to speak for themselves. And they talk about how they were told, that guy, he's just a donor, he's not your father. And yet many of these kids fantasized about him and wondered who he was and wanted to know, what traits do I share with him? Does he look like me? Does he know that I exist? Would he want to have a relationship with me? A lot of these kids, especially kids of sperm donation, have dozens or maybe hundreds of half siblings that they desperately want to know. So we can even see in some of the newer reproductive technologies that biology matters to kids because it gives them an identity that they're not able to discern on their own or from the other very often loving adults in their life. And oftentimes these kids, both adoptees, but even more so children created through sperm and egg donation, feel that they struggle with their identity. They struggle to know who they are. 50% of them would say my sperm donor is half of who I am. 63% say my sperm donor is half of who I am. And so many of them say, that man that's a stranger to me tells me who I am. And that's because biology matters. So the third reason why defending this natural right to both parents is so critical is because if you can give kids both biological parents, you give them the perfect gender balance in the home 100% of the time. It is fascinating to me that we will just celebrate when there's a female Supreme Court justice, or we've passed laws saying that there needs to be female representation on the boards of publicly held companies because we need equal representation. We need a gender balance in these institutions. And yet we have relentlessly targeted and destroyed the one institution that gets the gender balance perfect every single time. And that is marriage. Marriage is the one relationship that unites the two people to whom children have a natural right, and then guarantees 50% female, 50% male. Why does this matter? For two reasons. Mainly, gender is not a social construct. Men and women are different. It's not because society is telling them to act differently. It's because our bodies are different. Our brains are different. That means that we want different things in life. We make different choices, especially when it comes to things like sex and family and career. And the other side says any kind of difference proves that you're unequal. But we say, no, 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 baby. Those differences are what makes life beautiful and actually is required for life to begin. And so what does that gender complementarity look like in the home? Well, men and women, those differences are the most on display when it comes to child rearing. For example, the way they talk. Dads talk to their kids like they talk to everyone else, right? The dad walks in and he goes to the toddler, right? In the high chair that's like eating all of the pureed food. What's up, buddy? Did you have a good day today? I hope that you took a good nap because, you know, your mom, she can get a little bit moody when she doesn't have a break every now and then. And is it bath time tonight? Are we doing like a little bit of playtime? You're going to put the sponges on the wall? How are you going to do that bath time tonight? Dads talk to their kids like they talk to everyone else. Moms talk to children right at their level. They will simplify their language right down to that toddler level. Here comes the plane. Uh-oh, baby has a spill, right? So naturally, the child always has a parent that is forcing them to cognitively reach for the next level. And they've got one parent who's making sure the kid understands everything that they're saying. Here's another difference. Fathers emphasize gross motor skills. Typically, not always, but largely, it's the dad who is wrestling, climbing, running, jumping, building, and setting things on fire with the child, generally. Yes or no? Raise your hand, yes. Yes, you know it's true. Okay. Generally, it is the mom who is helping the child with the fine motor skills, tying her shoes, chopping little bits of cucumber with the butter knife, doing crafts, cutting, right? The mom is worried about all the things that are small and close. And the dad is like, I bet if I get a running start, I can make you go a lot higher on that swing, right? That's just what dads tend to do, right? They are more physical with their kids. Raise your hand if you've ever seen a parent throwing a baby in the air. Have you guys ever seen a parent throwing a baby? Keep your hand up if that parent was a woman, right? That is right. Women don't throw their babies. Women don't throw babies. Men throw babies, and babies love it. And the most incredible thing is when the baby is thrown by the man, who is naturally the most connected to, invested in, and protective of them, he throws them just to the edge of risk, but not beyond, right? Because he has a connectedness and protectiveness of the child that says, I'm going to bring the fun, but I'm not going to endanger your life, right? There's a lot of ways, I'll wrap it up for now, but there's the ways that men and women discipline their children, the way they orient them towards the world, the way they read books to children is different. But the summary is, if you have a male parent and a female parent, you get the complementary ways that maximize child development. You get it all. And that's not to say that every mom and dad fits this stereotype perfectly. Like in our home, my husband is a lot more sensitive than me. I'm just going to be real, right? My kids are sad and hurting and crying about something in their room, and he goes in and goes, oh my gosh, are you okay? Katie, Josh is sad, come in here. And I'm like, Josh knows where to find me. I'm in the kitchen. If he needs something, he can come get me, right? So we don't all perfectly match the stereotypes, but generally because of our brain composition, the differences in our physical bodies, men and women approach children differently. So differently that many experts would say there is no such thing as parenting. There is mothering and there is fathering. Men don't mother. Women don't father. Kids need both. So that is why, if you can defend children's right to their mom and dad, you get the safest, the formula that ensures that children are most likely to be safe and loved, the household that helps them answer the question, who am I? And the one that maximizes their development. The way we talk about this at Them Before Us is there's 3 staples of a child's social emotional diet. The 3 things that they have to be nourished on every single day if they're going to run the marathon of life. Mother's love, father's love, and stability every day. If you do without father's love, the kid's going to be emotionally malnourished. If you ditch mother's love, the kid's going to be emotionally malnourished. If you don't have stability, it's going to be really hard for that kid to thrive. Marriage is the only thing that we have discovered in our species as humans that brings stability. And that is why marriage is actually a matter of justice for children, because it is the only relationship that unites mom and dad for life. I'll quickly touch on some challenging topics, but then I'd really like to have your hardest questions. The questions that you're like, I don't know what I would say if somebody asked me this, right? So start thinking about those questions so that we've got, I promise I'll leave time for us to answer those questions. Marriage. Generally the idea that it's one man, one woman, one lifetime. Yeah, that's very 2014, right? Like who even believes that anymore? Outside of like children, not a lot. Right now, since we've redefined marriage, you would be hard pressed to find a government institution that would even say that children should have a mother and father. I dare you, just start listening for it. Start listening for anybody that would say children should have a mother and father. Right now, if you say that, people will be like, oh, that's discrimination, right? I mean, we have absolutely gaslit children in this country, but that did not begin with same-sex marriage. That began with divorce. Divorce was the original redefinition of marriage. Because before we had what we call no-fault divorce, where you could get out of a marriage for any reason, usually when one parent wanted to leave and the other parent desperately wanted to work it out. Before that, we considered that marriage was going to be permanent. But no-fault divorce says it doesn't need to be permanent, right? It can end as soon as you're unhappy. Well, the reality is every marriage is unhappy at some point. My husband and I are going to celebrate our 25th anniversary this year, and it's been great. Marriage is a lot better than what you've been told, but there were a couple rough years there. We never talked about divorce because both of us are children of divorce, and we swore our children would never, never, never live through what we lived through. But when no-fault divorce is an option and you hit those rough years, kind of easy to just look for the exit, right? And so when we said you can leave a marriage for any reason and we normalized divorce, a lot of people left their marriages, and that wrecked a lot of kids' lives. You know, divorce is actually considered an ACE, an adverse childhood experience, a traumatic event. In some ways can often sort of reset the child's fight or flight instincts and kind of impact the way they handle stress the rest of their life. One of the biggest problems with divorce is even if the child stays connected to mom and dad, they don't tend to have stability, right? They're bouncing between homes, or mom is repartnering with somebody else, dad gets remarried, these guys break up, these guys have another baby, mom partners with somebody else, they have stepkids. Now when you're at this house, you're adjusting to, you know, a new family over here. And since second and third marriages have higher increases of divorce, it's very likely that the child is going to live through multiple family transitions. So one of the biggest problems with divorce is it starves children of stability, right? Even if they're getting some of mother's love, you know, and even if they've got perfect split custody, it's hard to live without your mom or dad, even when you're not at their house, even if you know you're going to see them in a few days. B, there's a lot of turmoil in divorce, and that can be really hard on kids. So the next thing is same-sex parenting, right? And there was this huge push for same-sex parenting leading up to the redefinition of marriage. This big promotion of kids don't care if they have two moms or two dads. But what that means is kids have lost their mom or dad, and that's hard on kids. You know, it's hard if you arrive in a same-sex home after a divorce, or because you were conceived through sperm or egg donation, or because you were adopted into a family where you did not have the mother love or father love you craved. those homes always begin with loss somehow. And then the child still doesn't get either the mother love or father love that they crave. And in our book, we call that mother hunger or father hunger. Like these kids generally are being raised in like very LGBT friendly worlds, right? Where nobody's telling them that they should have a mom or dad. In fact, most people are like, you're so lucky to have two moms. You're so lucky to have two dads. And yet the kids still want a mom and dad. Why? Because they are a human child. And this is what human children want. They want to be loved by a dad and they want to be loved by a mom. And then we've got kids created through sperm donation and egg donation. And that is a technology that's being used by heterosexuals as well as homosexuals. It's being used by married couples as well as single adults. But in all of those cases, the child is losing half of their biological identity. And even for kids that are raised in a mother-father home, if they're missing out on that biological identity, some of them have really had challenges with identity issues, and many of them struggle with the fact that they were conceived through a commercial process. And here's something else that's very interesting, especially when you get to surrogacy, which surrogacy is, unfortunately, there's a lot of confusion about surrogacy, you know, in the pro-life world, because we love babies. Like, raise your hand if you love babies. I love babies. I love them a lot. So we think, well, surrogacy is just about babies, but it's not. Surrogacy in practice is about on-demand designer babies shipped across the world. That's what it is. It always requires that a child lose a connection with their birth mother, right? That first bond that we all have. It often means that children lose a relationship with their genetic mother if they were created through an egg donor. And some of these children go home to a completely motherless household where they won't even have the mother love that they want because they're being raised by a single dad or double dad or triple dad. We've got that happening too. All children made through surrogacy are created using IVF, right? In vitro fertilization. That is making babies in laboratories. And a fact that not a lot of pro-lifers know is only about 7% of babies that are created through IVF will be born alive. Most of them are discarded. They grade embryos, and the ones that don't make the grade are thrown out. The ones that are desirable, some of them are implanted, but then the surplus embryos are frozen. And oftentimes they never emerge from the freezer. Right now, we have about 1 million embryos on ice in this country, and them have been there for decades. So IVF and reproductive technologies, even though sometimes they produce living children, they victimize a lot more embryonic children than they bring to life. It is not pro-child technology. And that's very, very hard for some adults to hear because a lot of people struggle with infertility and they desperately want to be parents. And many of them would be incredible parents. But just like the woman who is struggling with the unplanned pregnancy, we need to empathize with her. We need to love her. We need to offer free babysitting for her. We need to throw the best baby shower she's ever going to have. We say, no matter how scared you are, no matter how unprepared you feel, your feelings can never justify violating this child's right to life. And the same thing is true with people who desperately want a baby, right? You've got unwanted babies in abortion, and you've got desperately wanted babies in the world of fertility. And we have to say to those adults, no matter how much you want a baby, no matter how much you long for a baby, your feelings never justify violating a child's right to life or violating a child's right to their mother and father. In both of these areas, the answer is for the adult to do the hard thing so the child's rights are protected. So you have just taken a tour through the world of children's rights. And do you guys usually go for about an hour? Is that how long you go? So we've got like 15 minutes and only the best and hardest questions are allowed.
What do you guys think? How many of you have heard some of these, some of the phrases that Katy mentioned on your college campus, that it doesn't matter if there's a man and a woman or that parents are interchangeable, right? How many of you have heard that even on your campus? Right. And these are, for the most part, Lutheran campuses, right? So when you hear them from students, or from, would you say mostly from students or from authority figures?
Mostly students.
Yeah. So what sort of things or what would you like to be prepared to, as far as how to have that conversation, right? What do you know you could say, and what would you ask Katy you could say?
I could, I guess, anticipate somebody asking, what about those children that aren't going to have their biological mother and father? Wouldn't it still be better for them to go to a same-sex home? And so we should still allow that, so that they're at least getting some love as opposed to no love.
Great question. So for example, like children in an orphanage or foster care kids like that, is that what you mean? Great question. So that often is sort of I want you to notice that is one of the big objections that I get in my work. And we call this a fringe case, right? That oftentimes when we're saying, look, children do best with a mother and father, they need maternal and paternal love. These adults grant them their biological identity. It is the environment that is the safest and most loving that they're going to have. People always, when they object, they pull out what we call edge cases. They go way, way, way to the edge of the conversation and try to pull that in. This happens in abortion too, right? What do people tend to do when you're saying children have a right to life? Babies need to be protected. What do they say?
They pull out the rape case.
There you go. Right. So this is the rape case for the marriage and family conversation. Okay. This is the one that they think, well, I got you here, right? Just like the people that bring out the rape exception. Well, I got you, right? So here is my answer to that. Adoption does not exist for adults. Okay. And a lot of times, like, people will say, well, LGBT couples, they have a right to adopt. And the answer is no, they don't. Nobody has a right to adopt. I'm an adoptive mom. My husband and I, we saw our kid's picture and we were like, get him, right? Like, we're going to go after him. We didn't have a right to him. We didn't have a right to say, give us that kid. Adults, heterosexual, homosexual, single, married, adults do not have a right to adopt. Children in foster care, children in orphanages who have lost their parents have a right to be adopted, okay? In adoption, the adults are not the client. The child is the client. Before I became a mom, I was the assistant director at the largest Chinese adoption agency in the world. And my director would say, one time I came to her and I said, I'm really having a hard time getting this application for this family approved. We're just running into so many roadblocks. And she goes, the goal is not to get those people approved. The goal is to find homes for every child in an orphanage in China that needs loving parents, right? The child is our client. The adults might be paying for it. The child is our client. If adoption goes well, every child that needs a loving home is going to find one, but not every adult that wants a kid is going to get one. The answer is going to be no to some of those parents. So first of all, we answer the question, who is adoption for? The adoption is for the child. So if the adoption is for the child, we need to evaluate adoption and placements based on the child's best interest. What does the child need? Well, whenever possible, they need a connection with their family of origin, or at least knowledge of their family of origin, right? The open adoption is so important to kids. Number two, they need maternal and paternal love so that they can have their development maximized. Number three, they need stability. So we need to prioritize not just moms and dads, but moms and dads, right? So they get the three staples of a child's social emotional diet met. Then we need to look at adults who are able to handle the child's special needs. We need to find parents that can place sibling groups together, right? In the foster care system, there's a lot of kids that are older in sibling groups. It's important to keep those kids together whenever we can, right? So once we go down that list, what that means is adoption agencies are not there to give kids to same-sex couples. They are there to place children in the homes that will best serve them. And whenever possible, that is a married mom and dad who can also meet their needs for cleft lip and cleft palate, or their ADHD diagnosis, or keep their sibling group together. Now, that ideal is not always possible, especially when it comes to older children in foster care or kids overseas who have significant medical problems. And sometimes a same-sex or a single couple might be the best placement, but it's not because that couple has a right to adopt. It's because, I'll actually tell you, I've actually lived this. When I was back in before I had kids days, I saw a child with serious special needs in an overseas orphanage because I was connected to the adoption agencies. And I know that kid was passed over by about 8 heterosexual couples, most of them Christian, who said, I can't take on that kid. But these 2 lesbians said, I think we can. And they said, Katy, will you go with us? Because we don't know a lot about adoption and we're going to need some help. And I said, yeah, I will. And they brought that child home. They were the only adults that were willing to, in essence, rescue that kid. She would have died. She had surgeries every year, right? But just because there is an edge case where it might be the right placement for a child to go to a same-sex couple or a single, does that nullify the reality that children have a right to their biological mother and father? Moms and dads are different. Those 2 adults furnish them with biological identity. Adopted children should have mothers and fathers prioritized in their life so they can have maternal and paternal love. All those things are still true. And so the answer is, my answer is to people who are uncomfortable with same-sex adoption is go adopt, Christian heterosexual couples, go adopt. And don't go get in line for one of the white drug-free infants where you wait years and years. Go get the forgotten kids. Go get the ones that have nobody beating down their door. Go get the ones that are going to need medical care every year. It's going to be hard. The kids deserve it. So there are rare cases, where, yeah, a same-sex couple or a single might be the best placement. That does not overhaul our marriage laws, and that does not nullify the reality that kids have a right to their mom and dad. Good question. See, that's an example of a hard question. TJ, how you doing? Are you doing okay, TJ? You're running with the big boys? Playing with the big boys now?
I'm good.
Okay, great.
I have a question.
Give it to me.
What is best for kids who are in a situation where other parents remarry or not?
I think I might have missed part of your question. Can you say that again?
So if there is a family of young kids and one of the parents died,
Okay.
remarry or remain single?
Okay, really good question. So what's very interesting is we talk about, we have a lot of statistics on divorce and remarriage because it's been happening for a long time, right? We passed no-fault divorce laws in 1969. By about 1980 and 1990, when my husband and I were growing up, that was peak divorce. And so we've got a lot of research on children of divorce and remarriage. And what is very interesting is that in some studies showed that divorce has a more traumatic effect on children than death of a parent. Why is that? Well, because when a parent dies, and so my husband's mother died suddenly when he was 16, way after his parents' divorce. He would definitely say that his parents' divorce was longer lasting and more traumatic, because what happened after his mother died is everybody came around him. Everybody recognized his loss. Everybody mourned with him. Everybody looked back and remembered her fondly with him. He was not alone in his grief. When it came to mourning his parents' divorce, he was completely alone. He couldn't talk to his mother about how sad he was that his father was gone, because she's like, that guy's a jerk. Why do you even want to be with him at all? He couldn't talk to his father about missing his mom when he was there, because his mom was remarried and the new husband was causing a lot of problems for the dad. He was totally alone. There was nobody to mourn with him. There was nobody to talk to. And if he did talk to, most adults would say, dude, you are so lucky because your stepfather has got money. Look at now, you guys can travel the world. It's just incredible, right? And so for him, there was a greater psychological impact because of the divorce, because he knew that when his mom died, his mom didn't choose to leave him. Oftentimes with divorce, there is a role of intentionality in the adults. Usually when a parent dies, the child doesn't go, it's my fault, because they know that the parent didn't choose to go. Very often, in the case of a divorce, especially a divorce in a low conflict marriage, where there didn't seem to be much wrong, very often the child will say, it's my fault. I was the reason. I'm why they divorced. It must have been me. So first of all, you're beginning with a very different dynamic with the death of a parent. So now we answer the question of what do you do when it comes to remarriage? And the answer for that would be the same as the answer for another remarriage question, whether it's death or divorce, right? And so what we see very, very interesting is that adopted parents, so remember how I talked about how unrelated adults spend less time, spend less money, tend to be less protective of the children in their care. That's true. Except for adoptive parents. Adoptive parents tend to spend more money and more time with their kids overall. Now, adoptees still don't fare as well because they are dealing with a lot of the loss of their early childhood, but there is a distinct difference in the amount of investment that the parent is putting into the child. So why is there a difference? It's because typically in step family situations, the new step parent is not seeking a relationship with the children. They're seeking a relationship with the parent, and then they have to deal with the children. It's very different when adopted parents say, like when we saw our son, right? We said, we're going after that kid. We're going to get into this relationship with this unrelated child because we are going after him. And that is different in a cohabiting situation, or usually different or a step family situation where they say, I'm going to go after the adult. It's the kid's parent that I really want. And I'll have to figure out how to live with the kids. So that there's a different mentality. So the question for step families is not death, why is the person single, death, or divorce? The question for the blended family is, are you going after the kid? Are you seeking to resolve the struggles of the child? Are you going to step in and try to mend the wound of the kid who suffered parental divorce or parental death? And obviously you're getting into it because you do love the child's parent, but it can't be just because you love the child's parent. You also need to realize, I got to be going after these kids too. I have to prioritize them as well. Part of the reason why I'm getting into this is not just because my romantic needs are getting met, but because I am purposefully, like an adoptive parent, going to seek to mend the wound of these kids. Is it challenging? Yes. Blended families are very hard, but the difference is not necessarily, so we have a little litmus test at them before us. And the litmus test is, are the adults doing hard things on behalf of the children? If so, we like it. Or are children having to do hard things for adults? In which case, we say, boo hiss, we don't like that one bit, right? We think adults should have to do hard things for kids instead of insisting that kids do hard things for adults. So there are certainly some step families that qualify for adults who are seeking to do hard things for kids. A lot of them aren't. Most cohabiting relationships are not. But yes, you can have a situation that is redemptive. But I will also say that especially women who have young children need to be very discerning about who they date and who they marry, because statistically, they could be inviting the person into their child's life that is statistically someone that will put them at risk. Not guaranteed, but they just need to be discerning. Good question, Matthew. Way to go.
So Matthew, just to hop on that as well. So my husband's a pastor, and I know Katie's husband is a pastor as well. And a lot of times in counseling, he will encourage them not to get remarried for at least a number of years, even to the point of wait until your children are raised, because of the trauma that he has seen kids go through again and again, because there's dating, right? So you're introducing someone into their lives, and then that someone goes away, and then you bring someone else into your life, through the dating process into their lives. And so that just compounds the loss, right? The desire to build a relationship and then the loss for the relationship. And again, it like Katie said, what is the motivation, and are the parents doing the hard thing, right? So even if there is dating, are you going to keep them separate from your kids until you're sure really that this is a good relationship that would result in marriage. It's a matter of, are you protecting your child, right? Are you protecting them emotionally, spiritually, and physically?
I have another question. Divorce has on kids. Are those problems still as pronounced or still there when the divorce happens, I suppose, like when they're 18, 19, 20?
Good. So does divorce still have major consequences after the child leaves the home? Is that your question? Yeah. So there's not as much data on that. But personally, I have talked to people whose parents have divorced when they are adults, and it wrecks them. It absolutely wrecks them. Some of them have told me, like, was it all a lie? And now a lot of times they're parents themselves, and they're having to deal with their own parents dating and splitting, and they feel like, now I have to become the adult in the relationship. Now I have to be the one that is stable, and I have to be the one that is like meeting everybody's needs. But a lot of times for the adult children of divorce that I've talked to, or children whose parents divorced when they were adults, they would say it really shakes their foundation, right? Because it makes them think, okay, so I can get 30 years into my marriage and then my husband can bail on me, right? When they kind of went into their own marriages thinking it's possible we can be together forever because their parents were living it for them. And then it can be very destabilizing. But in terms of data, there's not as much data on impacts of divorce once children have left the home.
So I'm going to jump in here because I know that it's 9:02 my time, and that doesn't mean that this has to end, but I do want to be cognizant of time, and thank you for setting aside your hour. We have a drawing to do, right? So if your name starts with the first letter that I pull out, which is a K. Do we have anyone starting with a K? Oh, Katie. Yeah. So does anyone else have a K in their name? If you do, you have just won a $20 gift card to Amazon. Is there anyone that does? Or should I pull another letter? I think probably I need to pull another letter. Oh, Kate, you won a $20 gift card.
Oh, good. My internet was out, but I just got back.
Simeon pointed it out that your name has the K. Okay, so I will send that gift card to you. And remember that if you would like a copy of Them Before Us, which was written by Katy herself. Please,
you want this book, I promise.
You do, yes.
Yeah.
Please put your email in the chat so that I can send that to you, okay? And then finally, our speaker next week or next time is going to be an individual who actually has a newborn. Her name is Erin, and she's going to come on and talk to you about the blessing of motherhood at the beginning, and how do we, what are some of the challenges and what are some of the blessings, and how can we as families support each other, but also internally, what sort of needs might a mother have or a child have? And you guys, you're not very far away from that, probably. Just saying. So anyway, okay, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys keep asking questions for those of you who want to stay, as long as that's all right with you, Katy. Is that okay?
I've got like 5 minutes.
Okay. Then I will stop.
Thanks for joining us for today's life topic. Check out whyforlife.org or email Michelle at whyforlife.org to find out how and when you can go live with us at our next Chats for Life session. Or join us next time, right here at Why for Life Podcasts, where youth learn how to be gospel-motivated voices for life.